Hey everybody, welcome back to Igau Zoo. Today's a bit of a macro episode, and we're really going to focus on creating this $1 million view for a small rest area. Now, I do realize I called this a micro episode. It really isn't. It's the same length as a normal episode for the channel, but it's not a habitat build. And part of the reason why I wanted to place this here and do this side episode is really an opportunity for me to build some more in Planet Zoo. But it was a challenge for me to improve something because toilet blocks are like the worst to build for. And I really think I've created something that's really cool. And that's at the end of the day, all that matters. Now, if you came here looking for a habitat build, have no fear. There is an episode coming. It's going to be coming out this weekend. And if you look really closely, you're actually going to get some sneak peeks at what was built for that episode. So if you pay attention, you might see some really cool things in the background. Now, the concept behind this bathroom is it's supposed to be an open air restroom. And the idea behind it is that you can come up here and have this amazing view as you're traveling from one habitat to another, or one enclosure to another. And it's also trying to harmonize a lot of natural foliage with this building. And that's the idea behind having this little station right here. And we're actually putting together a lot of the bigger details as we kind of start going through. And right there, you saw me kind of put together a large sink. And when I think about a bathroom, I love the idea of having these really cool like marble sinks with it's like one big long row, and you have a drain so it's tilted, so whenever you're washing your hands, it just kind of flows through. And that was my attempt at creating that. Now, I realize everything looks really gray right now, and it's part of the vision. I have an idea of what I want to build. I actually kind of borrowed this from another zoo. I actually don't know where it came from. I found the photo on Pinterest when I was looking at restrooms, and I love the idea of having this open air building. Now, on top of that, this does give me a lot of really cool South American vibes as well, which fits because this zoo is in South America. Now, that being said, didn't really do a whole lot of planning, and you saw that happen where I was originally going to put like a mesh wall here. The original inspiration photos had some mesh, and I wanted to color the mesh. I just couldn't do it, so instead I opted for these wood pieces, and have created a really cool, very thin-looking slat wall. And of course, it's going to change a little bit, but I think that's part of the joy of building in Planet Zoo is as you build one thing, you're going to realize like, hey, this doesn't really work out. We're going to build something else. Now, you're probably asking yourself, why are we doing a video on restroom block? And there's actually a really good few reasons for that. Number one, obviously our console players, you finally have access to Planet Zoo. And when I look at how I can dress up or make a building look really cool, I don't really see a whole lot of videos of that out there. And that's a shame, because while Planet Zoo is a lot of it is all about creating these really awesome enclosures and habitats, sometimes we forget that there's a lot of support structures that we need to kind of create, and this restroom block is a perfect example. And I wanted to do a video showing how you can create a restroom block. Now, I'm also going to be the first person to admit I'm not the best builder out there, but I think that's the point, is that anybody could build something like this, and all it takes is just a little bit of time. For me, this took about an hour and a half to put together. Of course, it is a little bit sped up. And I want to give a huge shout out to Sparrow, which seems to be the reoccurring theme on this channel. Sparrow has been a huge help in helping me to design some of these things. And whether she knows it or not, a lot of her videos definitely helps to shape how I build in my zoo. And I think this is a perfect example. I had no idea that the Twilight Pack had these really cool boards that are part of the doors. So I utilized the glass door because I really like the design of it, and then placed some boards on top of it, which really just gave it the idea that it is a more natural looking door, because you don't want a glass door into the washroom, of course. Now, I am playing around a little bit with the colors because obviously gray plaster is not what you want to see out and about. Originally, I went with this green because I felt green would mix really well with the foliage, and you can kind of hide it in there. And the idea behind it is as you're walking down this path, you might just stumble across this washroom. That being said, the green does not stay. It's okay. It works, but it's not the greatest. Now, if you're on PC, you hopefully have Lion Sign Pack, which is a fantastic resource that'll help you to build some pretty cool things. And these pieces actually do come from Lion Sign Pack, and they're a pretty amazing piece. I love these little signs, and in this case, we have a little arrow pointing to another washroom for our guests to use. So the idea behind it is we have our left and our right hand washrooms. They are single room washrooms. That means that any sex can use that washroom, and all you have to do is just make sure you use one that's vacant. So that's why we have 4 doors kind of set up. And then as I place it, I realized maybe we could kind of match the color for the signs with the color of the walls, and that's how we kind of get that much more subtle looking blue. Now, of course, too much blue looks kind of weird, and knowing that, I create this really cool looking border at the very top, and we're eventually going to adjust the color and make it very similar to the color of our little sinks. Now, if you're like me and you're building something and you maybe get something stuck behind something else, there's a really cool way for you to grab it. All you have to do is delete the piece that's hiding it, grab the piece that you want, and then undo the deletion, and you'll have that piece already grabbed, and then you can start to modify it. That's quite often that I've saved myself from having to delete a bunch of pieces just so that I can go back in and correct something that's pretty minor in detail. And you can kind of see everything coming together. We're coloring it, we're trying out a few different colors, and I land on this really cool gray blue, and I think it matches really well. It contrasts pretty crazy with the green, but I think it works really well. Now, there is always something I tend to forget when it comes to building a Planet Zoo, which is if you have a really cool blueprint that you maybe built for a previous enclosure, in this case our water taps, it's worthwhile to remember where you place them and to maybe set them up on an alternative blueprint. And the idea behind that is because you can reuse this, and this is so versatile. On top of that, not only do we need to add taps, I also tilted our countertop just a tad. And the idea behind it is as our guests start washing their hands, the water is going to go flow into these vents and out into a drain, and we can have an implied drain below where you see those lighter blue plaster blocks. So this would be where all of our waterworks are found. So if our staff need to work on anything like that, they have easy access. Now, of course, I can't forget either our animal hygiene station. I think this was a fantastic addition to Planet Zoo. Haven't really used it a whole lot because I tend to forget that it exists. And part of the reason why I forget is because it's not actually found under the construction menu, it's found under the facilities menu. And the best way to remember that is because it's something that it's interactable, it's not under a construction piece, it's a physical facility piece. Now, if you're anything like me, when it comes to building, you always try to put a plan in place, and this is something that you can kind of follow, keeps you on task. And if you're also anything like me, you tend to forget that you had an original plan. So originally, when I was first planning out this entire rest area, I had intended for our backstage area to be accessible by our staff. And the idea behind it is we could maybe like sink in some type of room back there, like a janitor room, if you will, or a little service room for the area. Now, as I was building our rest block itself, I totally got distracted, which is often the case within Planet Zoo because you get into a groove of things and you really like what you're building, and then you tend to just maybe forget what your original plan was. In my case, I actually sketched it out on a piece of paper, so I actually had it sitting next to me as I was building, totally forgot what I was going to do. So instead, I had to maybe what I like to call salvage the build. And that's definitely not the right term because there's nothing really wrong with this build, but we have to adjust a little bit. And first steps first is adding in a little bit of an additional concrete pad where our staff could be an implied entrance to the backstage area. So with that completed, it's time for us to move on to the final stage of the build, which is really what I like to call beautification. Right off the bat, we have a perfect area for a small man-made garden. So not going to be very foliage heavy, but we are going to have a garden there. We're going to use concrete blocks to make sure that we section that off. We're also going to add in some benches and a trash can, and this will be a fully usable bench area. So we actually have created a rest area. Now, on top of that, I didn't forget about the roof. We definitely need to have some type of roof on our build. And I wanted to go with something a little bit more unique in this case. So we're going to go with a one-sided slanted roof, and we're going to utilize some of our thatch roofing. Now, in a normal world, we would utilize thatch roofing that is on the grid. Not a fan of grid work when it comes to this particular style of build. So instead, I grabbed the panel, which is a super useful piece. Not every building piece has a panel, but the majority of them do. And I utilize that to allow us to pivot it to fall in line with our steel beams that we've set up. On top of that, we add an additional roof on the back just to add some additional sunshade because we really want this rest area to be shaded. Our guests are meant to take a break here if they need to utilize the washroom, maybe get some water. Maybe we have an implied water fountain here, and also maybe take a little bit of a break and wait for their family members. And just like that, we've pretty much completed our rest area for Igau Zoo. I'm really happy with how this turned out. I think that it was a perfect use of this space. Also helps to add a little bit of additional detail and realism to the entire build. And my favorite feature of this build has to be this open air sink area. The implied aspect being that you can have this amazing $1,000,000 view. And the really cool thing is it actually works as a $1,000,000 view in testing it. And then hopefully in some of the cinematic shots, you're actually going to see some of the guests hanging out here, almost as if they are washing their hands while they're looking down into the habitat. So it definitely works twofold and a really cool way of making this look a little bit more lifelike. Now, not everything is complete, and you're going to see a lot of this happen now, but it's not just about foliage for these garden areas. Off camera, I'm going to go in and add a significantly more amount of foliage to the build. This is going to help to flesh it out, give it that more jungle vibe. And on top of that, I'm going to replace the bamboo on the roof with some beams, and you're going to see that as well. Took a little bit to get there, but I didn't think you really wanted to see how that all came together. Now, as always, I just want to say thank you so much for supporting me and watching this episode. If you really like this and maybe if you want to see some additional builds occur down the road for buildings, let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, think about leaving a like, and if you're feeling up to it, subscribe. Definitely helps me out, but I don't want you to feel pressure to do so or anything like that. As always, once again, thank you so much for your support. And of course, ciao for now, everybody.
I pewnie säger doktora. Till och med de pani bevund.